going to tell you is that most people think that they're so difficult because they want to win. And so, you know, they're going to do whatever they can to win, which is true. They are going to do whatever they can to win. However, that is not actually what they want. What they really want is to manipulate you. So they constantly are moving the target. So even if they give you 3 choices of things that they say that they'll settle for, and you pick one, well, now it's changed. Because they are, the goal is to manipulate you. The goal is to make it as difficult for you as possible.
So maybe that is the win, though. I think that, I think your initial premise that they want to win, I think for them, winning is manipulating.
Well, that's my point.
Because they're still playing with your head.
But it's not winning the way a rational person
thinks.
thinks.
Yes, not the way a rational person thinks. Exactly.
Because a rational person thinks,
yes.
well, if I give them everything they're asking for, then they've won, so they should be happy.
Right.
But that's not what they want. So you have to understand that what their real goal is to manipulate you, because then they maintain a sense of control over you.
So what's interesting about that, though, is that this idea, because you said something interesting, that if you give the narcissist everything they want, then they'll be happy, and this will go smoothly. My guess is that, and you'll know this better than I because you're in the actual legal setting with them, that a lot of people who enter into negotiations with narcissists they're conflict averse. They don't want to fight.
100%.
They don't like, so to them, they've been forever trying to deal with this elusive target of the narcissist's happiness. One thing I really try to impart on the clients I work with is there's no such thing as a happy narcissist.
No, but you know what happens is, as you know, they start off this relationship with this whole love bomb phase, and so they spend the rest of their relationship trying to find that space again, because they once loved them. They used to be so great to them. They used to be so wonderful. So if I'm just good enough, if I just do what they want, then I'll be able to find that again. But you know, every single person who comes through the doors of my office says, I don't want to fight. Every single one. Every single one says, I don't want to fight, I don't want to spend a lot of money.
So here's my question. Do you ever get the narcissistic clients?
Oh, all the time.
So, okay, so they're not going to come in and say, I don't want to fight.
No, they do say, I don't want to fight.
Really?
Oh, yeah. But they say, we're pretty much agreed on everything. You know, they think that they've already talked their victim into an agreement. So they think it's going to be easy. And of course, they still treat the attorney like they treat everybody else. So this isn't going to cost a lot of money. So you don't need to spend a lot of time on this. So, you know, I'll just bring the agreement to you and you'll just draft it up and it's not going to cost a whole lot of money.
Have you ever had a case in negotiating a divorce where somebody has come in and said, I am looking for a fight? I'm going to punish this, you know what, or
every once in a while, but it's more like the spurned person, you know, like the person, and it's not that they say that I'm looking for a fight. It's more, I deserve this.
All right.
They spin it differently than that. It's more like he should pay because he cheated on me because we were supposed to stay married the entire time or whatever. I call that the difference between divorce law and divorce justice, because divorce justice doesn't actually exist.
That. Yeah, well, and it's a common trope we hear is the pit bull attorney. Hire me a pit bull. I need me a pit bull. Somebody who walks into a lawyer's office and says, I want a pit bull, is looking for a fight.
Well, I think in their mind, though, they're looking to protect themselves.
Well, okay, excellent. That's a great distinction. Okay, great. Yeah. Even though ultimately they are actually looking for a fight.
You know, and I've had people say, I'm hiring you because you're a pit bull, and I'm always thinking, that's really interesting because I think I'm just trying to be fair for my client or advocate for my client.
Right.
But when you're dealing with a narcissist, and going back to the question of why it's so difficult to deal with a narcissist, when you get into that litigation setting, because remember, you're dealing with the most scared, the most insecure personality type there is. Even though they put on this great big show, they actually have zero self-esteem. So they get all of their value from the external, and as you know, the supply. And so when they get into this litigation setting, they can't allow themselves to look bad. And now they've got this person who knows stuff about them, who has the ability to make them look bad by exposing them on some way.
That's exactly right.
And so what they do is they go on the offensive right away. Triangulation, you know, trying to get everybody against them, lying, manipulating everything the other person says. It doesn't matter what they say. It gets manipulated. So that's partially why it's extremely difficult when you get in that setting, because they go into survival mode.
The narcissist or the person?
Does.
Okay. Well, I mean, I would actually argue both people are going to survival
both of them
mode.
do.
Like everyone's got, especially the victim, for lack of a better word, might have their hands up against their face, like to try to protect themselves, which is something they've been sort of quietly doing for the duration of a relationship. Would you say, though, then, you know, because we're calling this negotiating with a narcissist, and obviously many of you I know who are watching are going through a divorce, but would you say these kinds of negotiation techniques would apply in other situations, a workplace setting or any of these?
Anytime you're dealing with a high conflict personality, anytime you're dealing with a narcissist, even if they're not technically, you know, a narcissist, if they have a high conflict personality, if they have a personality where, you know, they want to have control, where they're easily slighted, where they, you know, all of the personality traits of a narcissist, it's the same kind of thing that you're going to be dealing with. And so you can't go at it like a rational person. Rational people say, well, let's just find some middle ground and we can settle and we can have an agreement. That will never happen when you're dealing with a narcissist.
I would also imagine, and one of the tricky bits in narcissistic divorce, I see this all the time with my clients, is that a person has been hurt by the narcissist's infidelity, the narcissist lying, the narcissist level of severe, almost coercive control, okay? We live in a country where most states in the United States have what are called no-fault divorces, which means that there's no attribution of blame that has anything to do with how resources are divvied up. So in other words, it's not like you get a bonus because your partner cheated on you. Like, it doesn't matter why the relationship ended, but it ended. And I think in the world of the no-fault divorce, the narcissistic divorce is even more painful for people because there was so much due cause, right? Like, they're like, are you kidding me? This person gets 50% of my stuff and they cheated on me with 15 different people and this and that. And as the attorney, you must have to say, yep.
Well, it depends.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yes. So I just want to dispel a myth. And the myth is that no fault means that fault never matters.
Okay, great. That's an important point to clarify.
Yes, so no fault only means that you don't have to prove fault in order to get a divorce.
Okay.
So for years and years and years, you couldn't get divorced unless you proved that a person cheated on you or proved that a person abandoned you or something.
Okay.
No fault just means that you don't have to prove fault.
You can just say, I'm done.
You can just say it's irretrievably broken or whatever you say, in which, you know, each state has their own nomenclature. But it doesn't mean fault never matters.
Okay.
Because fault can matter. In fact, in Florida, in the alimony statute, it actually says that infidelity can be taken into consideration. Now, I've never seen a judge say, I'm ordering more alimony because the person cheated. But judges are people too, and so if you shock the judicial conscience in such a way where you're so bad and you've treated the person so horribly, they will take that into consideration.
That's very interesting.
And they can take it, and certainly they can take it into consideration when it comes to splitting assets. Because if somebody has spent a lot of money on a paramour of some sort, and I've seen the worst situations. I mean, I saw a guy who had a relationship with a woman for years and years. He bought her a house. They had a child together. He was sending the child to private school, all kinds of things and the wife never knew that this woman existed. And so, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars of marital money went into this person, and so the wife was entitled to half of that, what we call marital waste or dissipation.
Oh, interesting.
So,
okay.
So it's
that's important to know.
Yes.
That's really important to know.
It's not that fault never matters.
Okay. It can matter.
It can matter.
But you are a bit at the mercy of the court.
It is. I mean, you know, you start with the premise of 50-50 in most states. And, you know, some states call it equitable distribution. Some states call it community property. But it's kind of basically the same, you know, where you have a marital pot, you have a non-marital pot. I mean, you know, there's a his, hers, and theirs is what I call it. But it's not that it never matters. It can matter.
It can matter.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that one thing while assets matter, and they matter a lot for people, because many times people are saying, listen, I've worked with a lot of people who are the non-wage earning partner in the relationship, men or women, and they may have lost years in the workforce, right? So they're not going to be able to make as much money. So, equitable division of assets matters, but narcissists are tricky. Right, so they're very clever.
They hide money.
They hide money, and
100%.
forensic accounting is expensive, and all of that.
Yep.
But when it comes down to brass tacks, all things being equal, as long as people can pay the rent, the bigger issue becomes custody. And I guess that's something we're going to get to, and talk about, because I know that a lot of the people who are watching, that when it comes down to it, they'll say, you know what, I'd be happy to give it all up if I could get full custody. My understanding, and this is what your clarification would be great, that's not permissible to say, I won't take a cent, but I want the kids.
Well, child support is a right of the child.
Right.
It's a vested right of the child. It's actually in trust for the child in some ways, even though it doesn't go into a trust. And actually child support is an interesting thing too, because the way child support actually works is, it seems like one is paying the other. But what's really happening is that if you look at the child support statutes, if you ever get a copy of the statute book, you will see the way it looks is that there's one number for that child. So if the parents' combined income is X per month, then this is how much they should be spending on this child. And they take a lot of things into consideration. They, whatever the value is of putting a roof over the kid's head, or feeding this kid, or whatever the average is for that. And so they come up with a number that child should have spent on him based on these parents' combined incomes. And so, and then they if there's a disparity in incomes, then that disparity is what gets paid to the other parent.
Okay. But there's going to be a disparity in income many, many times.
Of course.
Especially when you have a wage earning and a non-wage earning situation. So when we get out of the sort of the finer legal points, what people will say is that, usually it's the narcissistic parent is saying, why the hell should I give her that much money? You just said it's not giving her anything, it's for the child. They're not going to see it that way.
No.
As far as they're concerned, you can say all the legal statutes, till the cows come home, this is going to the child. That narcissistic parent sees that money going to that parent who makes less money or no money
100%.
to take care of that child.
100%.
Okay? So going back again to that original question, that while child support is for the child, I can't tell you how many clients I've worked with who said, can't I go to the court? And because the argument is becoming, the narcissist is like, I don't want to give him or her anything.
Because the court doesn't want children to become wards of the state.
That's right. I understood. But you
see, they won't allow anybody to give up child support.
So then where that's the interesting conundrum that the victim, as you will, the other partner who's not narcissistic or parent gets into, is that they're like, I just don't want my kids to be raised by this person. This person is toxic. They might be dangerous, but we know that level of dangerousness that has to be established.
What you're getting into, though, is leverage.
Okay, and that's what we're going to get to. Interesting.
Yeah, because that's a point of leverage. Saying I'll give up child support, that's something that you don't want to give it in on right away, because you want to get other things first. I mean, there are ways that you can get around the whole child support thing, which we'll get into
into that
episode. But that is a piece of leverage that you don't want to give away. And don't give away your leverage too early, people, please.
Those of you who have watched my videos know that I've talked ad nauseum and read my books. It's all about the different types of narcissism and how they manifest. It does seem like there's going to be some similarities and differences on the basis of the type of narcissist we're dealing with. Something I've always wanted to bring home to everyone is the type of narcissist someone is often has a lot to do with the kind of day they're having. And by that I mean, any narcissist who's having a good run of it, they're making a lot of money, they got the stuff they want, they're getting the people they want, most importantly, they're getting the validation and the supply they want, more often than not are going to present as grandiose narcissists. Life's going their way. And so, but some people just tend to be more of the grandiose narcissistic type, and that's their baseline, okay? We know that in general, People who are narcissistic have empathy deficits. They're deeply entitled. The grandiose narcissists are obviously quite grandiose. They're arrogant. They have a propensity for rage. They do not regulate disappointment well. They're chronically seeking admiration. They're seeking validation. They are superficial, and they are they have not only difficulty regulating their emotions, but they're also incredibly sensitive in the face of criticism. They can dish it out, but they can't take it. The presentation of the grandiose narcissist then becomes someone who really is sort of like that person, that kind of, it can feel sleazy salesman-like, it can be like I'm the king of the world-like, it can be I've got all the answers, it can be annoying guy on the bar stool or annoying gal on the bar stool. All of that said, what are the leading tips you have with, especially in a divorce setting, of how to negotiate with a grandiose narcissist?
Well, so the grandiose narcissist is going to do everything they can to keep control of the situation. So the first thing they're going to try to do is try to get rid of your lawyer in some way, because your lawyer is the person who is now between the narcissist and the person who they want to control. And the lawyer now becomes the enemy, because that's the person who's going to actually maybe expose the narcissist for what or who or what they are, or maybe be between them and them getting the deal that they want or that they think that they should have. And so they're going to try to get the person to meet at Starbucks. Let's just meet at Starbucks, you know, we don't need lawyers, you know, so that's the thing that they're going to do.
Okay.
And they're going to say your lawyer is just after the money. I've heard that, you know, he or she, whatever it is that they can possibly dream up and say, that's what they're going to say, because they want you to get rid of the lawyer. So this is what I tell people all the time is, you have three choices. You can stay with this person and stay married to them, which I don't recommend.
But I've got, you know me, y'all can read my book, and I got a whole bunch of videos telling you how to stay if you need to stay, because some people have to stay.
Well, I don't recommend in the long run. I mean, if you have to stay for kids or you have reasons or whatever, but in the long run, you probably want to work this person out of your life. Number two is to take exactly what they want you to take with your pat on the head and walk away. But we already talked about that. Even if you choose door number two, it's going to be a shifting thing. It's never going to be exactly, because if they think that you're just taking what they're offering, then they're like, well, maybe I should offer less or whatever, because they just want to mess around with you. And then door number three is, you know, you're going to have to fight up against this person. So, you know, don't have those meetings alone, because you know that this person manipulates you. You know the person's a liar. You know that this person is going to say and do whatever they can to get what they want or to manipulate you. So don't do it. Don't have those conversations. And what I recommend for people to do in those situations is just say, I don't know, I'm just talking to my lawyer. Blame it all on your lawyer. Let your lawyer be the fall person. You know, I don't know, I just want what's fair. I just want, you know, what my rights are, and I'm going to let the lawyer sort it out. That's what I suggest that people do.
So it's, I mean, in all of my work working with individuals who are experiencing narcissistic abuse or in narcissistic relationships, my consistent, you know, don't move away from a position is realistic expectations and radical acceptance. This person, to the point you're now getting a divorce, things have gotten so toxic. And I have to say, in narcissistic relationships, people let things get a lot more toxic than they would in another relationship where they simply grown apart from someone, because you've become so mentally confused. And with a grandiose narcissist, you're so used to being lorded over, you're so confused by the gaslighting. You know, people are, and the grandiose narcissist plays that game really, really well. And you're burned out. So that idea of a Starbucks meeting is like, okay, fine, you're so exhausted. But then I say, realistic expectations, radical acceptance. This is a person who manipulates. It's who they are, it's what they do. Just like a scorpion stings, a narcissist manipulates. And to have realistic expectations that all of a sudden, now that you filed for divorce, now they're going to become an angel. It's not how it's going to go down.
Oh, in fact, it's the opposite because you no longer have value to that
Yeah,
narcissist.
yeah.
In fact, you're a liability. Because as long as you were still in that narcissist world and they thought that maybe you were for them in some way or you have some value to them, then they're sort of measured a little bit more.
Yeah.
But once you no longer have value, you are now the enemy. And so it is on. And they, you know, I think in a subsequent video, we're going to talk more about all the different kinds of things that they do in a divorce setting. But, you know, once you no longer have value to a narcissist, you are the enemy.
Yeah, and I also have to say too, though, with a grandiose narcissist, what people do need to be prepared for psychologically is it's not over. Like, they're not just going to start a fight. They're actually going to try love bomb sequence 2, love bomb sequence 3, because in some ways it's not that they want you back. They may. A lot of times grandiose narcissists care deeply about what they look like to the world. They want to look like the Christmas card. They want to be the happy family. They have a whole narrative around, I just want to be the happy family. This matters to me.
Right.
And you know, it's a whole shtick that they're selling to the world.
Right.
So they want to keep that back, but it's also a game. It's, can I lure the rat out of its hole? Can I bring this person back out? It's what it was from the jump. That's
So
what
I know
love
how to
bombing
call
is.
that bluff right away.
Which is?
Get them to sign a post-nup right now. Okay, you want me back? I'll come back. Sign a post-nuptial agreement.
That's great. Perfect. Now we know how they're typically going to react.
Of course, they're not going to say yes.
No, they're not
going
gonna
to. So now
Right.
now you've called their bluff.
That's right. And they play on that vulnerability and they say, really, a post-nup, so this really was just about money. And that's when the other person, the non-narcissistic person who's already been so beaten down by this, who's already vulnerable to this, who already has issues around self-doubt, confusion, all the things that happen in narcissistic abuse, says, no, this wasn't about money, and they find themselves getting into the thickets and can often get pulled in. They want to seem noble. No, this was never about money. This was about you treating me with respect. And then I've seen many people at that point get sucked right back in with the grandiose narcissist.
You know what I say to that? What's wrong with it being about money? If you're entitled to it.
Right. And there's the difference between the lawyer and the psychologist.
If you're entitled to it, if the law provides that you're entitled to it, then don't be embarrassed about asking for what the law is providing for you.
But here, this is where I will take a slightly different stance as a psychologist. I think what a lot of people say is that, yes, it's about money. This is a marriage. Marriage is really a contract. Marriage really is a contract. Stop romanticizing it. It's a contract. But marriage is a contract that they are entitled to it. But I do think that people who have been in long-term relationships with grandiose narcissists, it is really about, can you please reflect on what you just did to me for the last 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years? You know what? They'd say, I'd walk away from $10 million.
I have the best story for you with that. The best story. So I was representing a guy who was number 2 in the largest development company in Florida. And, you know, he was one of these narcissistic personality types who came in and, you know, any room in your retainer and whatever. And I was like, no, but, you know, if you want to go on down the road, fine. But so I didn't, but he was trying to get me to reduce my retainer. So we get to mediation, and it's like 9 o'clock at night, and we're all settled on everything, and he's agreed to pay her around $250,000 a year in alimony. And he was like 55 years old. So just for easy math, you know, it's at least for the next 10 years. Because when you retire at 65, you could potentially ask for a modification. But so we're talking about $2.5 million. Okay. We're getting ready to sign. Mediator comes into my office and says, or to the conference room where I was with my client, and says, I need to talk to you. I have a very unusual request, but I want to run it past you before I run it past your client. So he pulls me aside and says, the wife says that she will waive alimony, waive $2.5 million, if he apologizes to her for how he treated her during the marriage. And guess what? He didn't want to do it.
And there it is. See? So I'm telling all of you, there it is. You know? So
I made him.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, you will. Get over there. And so he went over there and apologized, and she waived alimony, and that was that. But that was worth more to her.
Right.
And she knew also that he wouldn't want to do it.
Right, and so here's where it's, again, as I'm going to put the psychologist hat on here, which is, there is something unsatisfying about that. He didn't want to apologize. It wasn't a real apology. And one thing we do know in the world of narcissism is a narcissist's apology is it's worthless. It's less than worthless. It's the gum on your shoe because it's manufactured. It's somebody saying, just for $2.5 million, say sorry. That's not an apology. That's a, you know,
From my perspective as his attorney, I'm like,
right,
all day long.
Exactly.
As her attorney, I'd have been like, you're not asking for that. No way.
Right. And as her psychologist, I say you just bought yourself another 10 years of healing because that wasn't an apology. I think that the struggle becomes, you know, and again, this is where it's interesting to have the lawyer talk to the psychologist, is that when the apology feels not authentic, the person says, you know, what was that? And I'll say it was nothing. It was, you know, it was window dressing. It's very difficult for a narcissistic individual to apologize because of the shame factor, because of the insecurity factor, because of the lack of capacity for them to exercise empathy, right? What he does, that client of yours, he doesn't believe he caused her pain.
Right.
He doesn't. He just wanted his money.
Right.
Okay? She was in pain and the other person didn't acknowledge it. It's looking into the mirror that doesn't look back. And that's there, to wit, is the conundrum where I might say, okay, if you know, I would tell somebody, get the money, then at least you can get the therapy. Because,
exactly.
you know, that's,
I mean, hey, from my perspective as his lawyer, my job was to advocate for him.
Right.
So it wasn't my job to say no to that.
Right.
It was my job to say, get your butt in there and apologize.
Right. Yes.
I mean, you know, because that's the kind of thing that he would have come back to me on later and said, why didn't you make me?
That's right. And exactly, and blame you. But my job is to tell that woman, you didn't get a real apology. What can we learn from this relationship?
I'm sure she probably regretted it.
Maybe, who knows what her financial situation was, you know? Maybe, who knows what I don't know her mindset is, but at the end of the day, I would have said, you know, how do we help you learn from this so you never pick someone like this again? You know, that's really what it is.
Because
how do we learn from this? People do
yeah.
pick. So, you know, just as a twist here, because we do talk about, while the grandiose narcissist is the most common, the one we see the most, there are these other subtypes, what we often call the covert or vulnerable narcissist. This is what I often view as the more victimized narcissist. When you meet them, they're often a little bit more sad, they're softer, they're not as in your face. In fact, a lot of people want to rescue covert narcissists. They're like, if this person just got a break, they'd be fine. What they don't realize is right under the surface is this tremendous amount of contempt.
Yes.
Contempt for other people, contempt that other people have it easier, contempt that life didn't go on, jealousy and envy, and all of these kinds of emotions. And the insecurity in the covert/vulnerable narcissist is much greater.
Yes.
Would you say then, are there any other unique elements of negotiation then that come up with covert narcissists?
Well, so they're not going to be as in your face, and it's not going to be as obvious to the divorce lawyers or to the judge. So the judge might say, oh, this poor person, and fool everybody, and especially because the covert narcissist tends to be more passive-aggressive, and so it's easier to explain away the things that they will do, you know, so they might, you know, inadvertently send an email to somebody, oh, oops, it was an accident. And you know that it wasn't an accident because you've been living with this person for years. So they're much more adept at hiding the kinds of things that they're doing. So in my opinion, they're actually more toxic in a lot of ways.
Can be, yeah, absolutely.
Because it's going to be harder to get the system and the people in the system to understand the personality type that you're dealing with. You know, if you're having a parental evaluation or a custody evaluation done, you know, they may fool that psychologist.
Absolutely.
Because they're going to say, oh, I'm such a victim, and you know, this other person was so horrible to me, and I can never catch a break, and you know, I want to work, but I'm so sick all the time, and I always feel terrible. And you know, and so they're actually much more difficult in the divorce setting, and they'll still do the same kinds of things. This triangulation is a biggie with covert narcissists. Let's get the whole world on my side. Let's get everybody to see how much of a victim I am and how horrible this other person is. And they're actually very good at getting the person.
Yes, they are.
Getting people to believe them.
And leaving the person who has been victimized by them, looking like a bad guy. You know,
Right.
this person actually has been enduring so much when you've been in a relationship with a covert narcissist, and everyone's like, why are you being so hard on him or her? You know, what, well, come on, like, cut. And there's a lot of gaslighting by other people that happens in these relationships, where,
Right.
especially when it's careening towards a divorce. So
Yes.
it's definitely a very, very toxic dynamic. So when a person is in a divorce or in any form of negotiation with a covert narcissist, then what?
Well, it's the same
It's the
kind
same
of thing
kind of
that
thing.
you're going to have the same sort of thing. I mean, they're going to probably obstruct you. They're, you know, they're not going to give over information. You know, they're going to put up roadblocks at every chance that they can. They're going to manipulate everything that you say, but they're just going to do it in a way that's more under the radar and harder for
right.
you to bring to people's attention, because when you bring what they're doing to people's attention, it's the kind of thing where people go, well, that's not that bad, or that was
That's right.
probably
That's right.
just a mistake.
Yes, exactly. Gaslighting.
Yes, exactly. So, you know, whereas an overt narcissist or the grandiose narcissist,
You can see it.
It's much more manipulative. You can actually see it right in the email chain. It's easier to follow the email chain and go, well, okay, here you go.
Would you argue maybe it's a different form of manipulation? Because I think passive aggressiveness is at its core manipulation, right?
100%.
It's the attempt of, maybe it's not even an active attempt, but it is the induction of negative emotion in another person, typically guilt, to mobilize action on their part, not because the other person wants to do something, but they're doing it to stave off this sense of guilt.
And it's absolutely just as traumatic for the victim.
Yes. Yeah,
100%.
manipulation's manipulation. I mean, I don't
yeah.
care if it's in your face. I don't care it's through a passive-aggressive back door. It definitely leaves people sort of reeling. So this takes us then to one last form of narcissism I want to get to, because I think it's worth mentioning because it's more dangerous, which is malignant narcissism. There are researchers out there that view malignant narcissism as sort of like that space in the middle where more of a grandiose narcissistic style meets like a low-grade psychopathy, meets this sort of really Machiavellian, manipulative, political, like, you know, very skilled, working other people's style. Malignant narcissists are where we're going to see your CEO types, we're going to see your world leader types, we're going to see people at the top who are able to charm you, then go chew someone else out, then go destroy someone else's life, and then go charm someone else. Like their ability to just sort of do that leaves everyone confused, and they've usually charmed the right people, including people like judges. They're that good. Whereas the covert narcissist ain't charming anyone. You know, even the grandiose narcissist gets a little bit nervous during a divorce. A malignant narcissist is very cool under stress.
Yeah, it's harder to get them unglued.
Yes, it is. It is, and they can be dangerous. I mean, we have been talking about, you know, negotiating a divorce thus far from a perspective of, you know, not from a violence perspective. Now, remember, abuse in a relationship can take many forms. The majority of clients I work with are dealing with severe psychological abuse, which to me is every bit, perhaps even more traumatic than physical abuse. And it also
100%.
includes things like stalking, coercive control,
Well, they have
financial
no
abuse.
boundaries.
Yeah, so all that things, the financial
We're here to
control,
follow
all of
El Quas.
it is like it's a disease that overtakes the person, and they realize they're literally living in a prison when they're in a relationship with a malignant narcissist. It can escalate to danger, and in the cases I've consulted on where a person's divorcing a malignant narcissist, we have to come up with a safety plan. And that's where I've worked with people who have expertise in domestic violence on having a go bag and how do you set that up and how do you, I mean, we're teaching people to clear out the search histories on computers and stuff. I mean, in the electronic age, in some ways,
also
it's
save the
hard.
things that they need to save.
Save what you need to save. Clear out what you don't want to do. Go to libraries,
Change
use
your
other computers,
passwords.
change
I
your
tell people
passwords.
that all the time.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, this is a different territory. Is there any other thoughts when you're negotiating with someone who, if not full on dangerous, like going to really do physical harm to you, is always menacing? They send that menacing email. There's something almost stalky about them. It doesn't relent. Emails at 3 in the morning. I mean, these are the clients I work with who are the most wrecked. I mean, they are in a post-traumatic stress state almost all of the time.
Yeah, and they have no boundaries. So, I mean, they'll just show up at your house. They'll do whatever they need to do, whatever they want to do. So, first of all, let me just say, and I tell my clients this all the time, if you feel that you are in danger, please call the police. You know, don't call your lawyer. Your lawyer can't do anything right away. So, you know, a lot of times I hear people saying, how is he or she getting away with this? And it's
I hear it all the time.
very common thing. And so let me just inject reality into that statement really briefly. And that is that there are no divorce fairies that linger around people's houses and come jumping out of the wall when somebody misbehaves.
Exactly right.
So how are they getting away with this? Remember, the only person that has any power over anyone else in our society is the judge. That is it. There's law enforcement if you break the law. If you do something criminal, you can call the police. Other than that, it's the judge. Those are the only avenues of getting someone to behave. That's it. So when you're dealing with somebody who is menacing and maybe unsafe or stalking, then you have to call the police, because most states, in order to get any kind of an injunction, so if you want to get some kind of injunction against the person, or I guess in regular word terms, it's a restraining order or something like that, you have to be able to show that you're in danger. You have to be able to show, you can't just say, I'm scared of this person, because this person has civil rights, they have constitutional rights, they have to have notice and opportunity to be heard and all of that sort of thing. And so call the police if you think that you're in danger. It will only help you get that restraining order down the road if you decide that that's what you want. The worst possible thing that you can do is go try to get a restraining order and then it doesn't stick, because now the person feels empowered. So you have to be really, really careful about making sure that if you're going to go that route, that it's going to stick and you're going to get it.
But also, let's warn people that once you get a restraining order, the likelihood of violence skyrockets.
Well, because they're
Yes, but that's the reality check. I don't want people to think restraining orders are an answer. I think they're a step, but they're a step that put people in danger, and that's the nature of how our system works. So I think to say that I mean the number of people, at least the number
I have a lot of people ask about them. So the only other path is some kind of a civil order, which would be, exclusive occupancy of your house or something like that. And, those things you can get, but they take time.
Yes, they do.
So you have to, what the lawyer's power is to file a motion, set the motion for hearing in front of the judge. Then, and all the judges are very backed up. The judicial system is extremely backlogged. And so it takes a while to get a hearing.
Yes, it does.
And then once you get that hearing, newsflash, the judges don't always rule right away, which is really frustrating too. And so sometimes you're waiting weeks, months. I've even waited months for an order from that judge. So how is he or she getting away with this? Well, the only way you can rein in the behavior is by creating enough leverage in order to get that person to come to a table and potentially have a resolution with you, or get enough leverage that you can convince the judge to order things to go your way.
Right, which is hard. And again, in the populations I deal with, I deal with the people where things didn't go their way, and too many women who are beaten up or killed because the restraining order came that inflamed the violence. It's a nice idea, and law enforcement has more leverage. So it really opens up this whole issue of these are complicated issues. And in the bottom line, and I think one of the most painful things I've heard is the number of clients who've worked with me who've said, this person is a bad person. They should not be raising these kids. And again, it's usually not even the money piece. And they'll still be upset. Like, I don't know how you expect me to do all this with this little bit of money. But how can you let this person half the time raise children? And I'm telling you, as somebody who's worked with these families, I have seen the majority of narcissists I've worked with got 50% custody.
Yeah, because
50% custody.
Yeah.
And let me tell you this, there's no happy ending to this. Children are destroyed.
Well, here's what happens a lot of times in the negotiation for that, and especially in states where child support is tied to time sharing.
Yes.
Which a lot of states it is. Some states it's not, but most states it is.
Yeah.
And so what they do, especially if they're the moneyed spouse, is they go for time sharing, because then they pay less in child support.
That's right.
And a lot of times, though, they end up not taking it, which means that the non-moneyed spouse isn't getting the full amount of support,
And still with the kids.
they have the kids all
Yes,
the time.
right. Which, again, I understand what you're saying, that this is a right of the child, but I always advise clients, I say, anytime they try to blow you off, and blow off the kids. Like, they got the kids 50% of the time, so they didn't have to give you the money. That's why they fought for it. They didn't want the kids. They wanted the money, okay?
But
now,
it is also, though, the facade of I got my kids 50% of the time. Because they don't want to tell the world that they didn't want their kids.
Right, they don't want to tell the world, but they don't want their kids.
No, but they want the show that they got 50%.
Right. So after the show is proven and they can walk around saying they want 50%, they're always trying to foist the kids on the other partner, 100%. To which I tell the other partner, who's usually the one I'm working with, take them. They're like, but this is unjust. I'm like, this whole thing is unjust. Didn't you say you want to be with your kids 100% of the time? Anytime they give them, take them, because the less time those kids are spending with the narcissistic parent, probably the healthier for your kids. Now, what does end up happening is that they're not often getting the requisite additional money that more time would take. They figure it out. But I'd say if you can get the time with your kids, get the time with your kids.
Okay, so a little strategy here as far as during a divorce. If the divorce is taking several months, which a lot of them do, then give the narcissist 50% of the time during the temporary period, because you will give them rope to hang themselves that way. Because then by the time you get to that final hearing or you get to the mediation, you've now kept a log, which I tell everybody, keep a log.
Oh, so do I. Yes,
so you've now kept a log that shows that this person showed up late, didn't take them, asked you to take them, blah, 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 because they can't help being themselves. They're not going to take the kids 50% of the time, even during that 9-month or 1-year period. You will have lots and lots of times that they asked to change the schedule. They showed up late, blah, blah, blah. And so now you have that leverage. Now you have the information that you need in order to push for the custody arrangement that you want.
Okay, it's a great point. I mean, again, we'd probably talk for 17 hours on this because we've seen it from both sides of it, and it is interesting, like, to watch that. I say exactly that, is you have to keep the most detailed log. I said it's almost like you're keeping records and charts the way a physician would, like days, hours, you
I've
name
won
it.
entire cases on those.
Yes, I'm sure that's good, and I hope you heard that. She's won entire cases on those. You can't do this after the fact. You have to do this in real time. You're not going to be able to even construct it a week later. In real time, it has to become a daily practice that you're logging this stuff. It's difficult, it's painful, it's uncomfortable. You must do it. It's part of your healing, but it's also part of your strategy.
Just open a notes thing in your calendar or your phone, or use an app. There are apps just for taking notes for that. I mean, so just get into the habit of logging it real time. And now we're going to talk about the do's and don'ts. One of the things that I say that people should definitely do is document. And I know you tell your clients that too.
Thing. It's a good place to start, because I think it is, if it's the only do you do, you're in good shape. And I don't just use this document recommendation just in marriages and close relationships and divorces. I make it a strong suggestion in workplace issues, in other kinds of disputes you may be having, sometimes even in family issues. And it's interesting, my motivation for documentation, as you can imagine, it's to substantiate a legal argument, yes, but it's also to help with your sanity. Because sometimes people are like, no, maybe that didn't happen. I'm like, no, sweetie, in your journal on January 5th, it happened. You wrote it down. They're like, oh, yeah. So, the narcissistic relationships are absolutely impacted by euphoric recall. People strangely are able to remember the good stuff about these really bad relationships. The documentation sometimes becomes a place where you can say, yeah, no, this isn't healthy.
Well, it's that, and I would add to that the reason, another really good reason to document is that narcissists are pathological liars. So you will catch them in lies if you document. And I've won entire cases on people's notes. So, and there's really no limit to how detailed you can be. It's really kind of just how meticulous you want to be. Because, if they're late for picking up the kids, if they're late for a payment on something, if they made a snide remark, if they wrote an email that was not reflective of a conversation and they tried to pawn it off as a conversation that you had. Something like that. You know, just any little thing that just seems off to you, just take note of it. Because, you know, when you ask the question, how is he or she getting away with this, which you're going to ask that, and I always say there's no like divorce fairies that come out and stop people from doing things. So, you know, they won't get away with it if you end up in front of the judge and you have the proper documentation.
It is a, you know, I always say to people, you know, want to know how you know you're being gaslighted or in a relationship with a narcissist? I'll tell you. You, in arguments, you put text messages in front of them. You feel compelled to record conversations, and you feel the need to write long novels of emails to them to explain your feelings. You're doing that because you're not being heard and because you are being gaslighted so much that you have to show them this proof. This is taking this to another level and for a different reason. Again, it's to provide that substantiation, and it's not just about writing things down. It's